chapter clicked in to College Volleyball Weekly on Viral Volley Media. Now here's your host, Rob on mic.
Oh, didn't get to say, hi, Dan. Hi, Brad. Hi, Jay. Theo was on nice and early. All right. Episode 258 of College Volleyball Weekly, men's top 20. On screen as always, but it's going to be all of them this week. It is the Coaches Takeover episode, except for one little tidbit that I'll drop in the beginning. Theo Edwards of CSUN, Brad Rothschild of UC San Diego or UC Blacks Beach. Let's pull that one. Jay Hosick of George Mason, and the Fighting Flyers, Dan Friend of Lewis University. Good morning, gentlemen. Always great to have you on.
Shouldn't it be UC, not UC Blacks Beach, but UC Nude Beach?
Yeah, just don't Google Blacks Beach.
Yeah, don't use your work computer, everybody.
Your enrollment just went up 500% right there. Well, I want to start with the show because I know last week we had to cut it off short, and I apologize to all those who wait for the episodes to come out. We didn't cover a few teams, but we definitely had them on our radar. It was on my notes, just ran out of time, and it was Hawaii going to North Carolina. But we will talk extensively about Hawaii this week because they did something really huge this week. So with the Coaches Takeover, we're going to start off with some topics that these guys happen to pick beforehand because they're prepped just like that, or just come in hot and know off the top of their head. So who wants to jump in first?
I'll kick us off. Why not?
All right.
Watching matches this week, a big one for the Big West and a really interesting one, I think, for men's volleyball in general is San Diego versus Stanford. And congrats to Brad on the big win up north. And it was a really, really awesome match, super fun to watch. And after the match and texting Brad, he told us it was a battle, and that it was. It was really back and forth. San Diego, in watching it, San Diego got off to a little bit of a slow start in set one. And that kind of ended up being the difference in set one. And, when you're on the road and especially in their secondary gym, you got fans sitting right on top of you, and it can be a tough place to play. So San Diego got off to a little bit of a slow start, but they found it in set two. Anthony Sherfan really, really kicked it in gear and started really bombing the ball. And this is one of those matches where, especially in a five-setter, you can look at the coaching and some of the adjustments that were being made. And I thought San Diego and Brad did a really, really fantastic job. And looking at the numbers, they slowed Wagner down big time. Wagner hitting 167. Any coach going up against Stanford, if you can hold Wagner under 200, you're doing something really, really nice, and that's pretty exciting. They also held Clinton to 125, which I thought was pretty exceptional too. And looking at the box score, they actually had Snooey over 300, but according to Volleymetrics, he was at 260. And so to have all three of those guys hitting nothing over 260 is pretty impressive. And tip my hat to San Diego and some of their blocking schemes, some of the adjustments that they ran, because they definitely ran the show in terms of blocking. In set five, I thought was really where things started to differ. And obviously San Diego had ends up taking set four. So it was tied 2-2. And at the end, there was some fearless serving from San Diego. It seemed to me like Stanford was letting off the gas a little bit in terms of their serving and really hoping to keep balls in bounds. And Brad and the Tritons, man, they were bombing balls and doing it fearlessly. In addition to that, limiting errors. So they kept the ball in bound while serving tough. And Anthony Sherfan, I think this is probably one of his best matches of the year so far, just in terms of clutch performance and some of the things that he was doing in moments when they really, really needed it. So tip my hat to San Diego, big win for the Big West, and a big upset win for San Diego.
Well, let's jump over to the rest of the panel. Thoughts on Brad's win?
I just want to let you know when I go to do my breakdown, I will not be as good as Theo. Theo, you were fantastic, just so you know. So.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
I would just go ahead, Jeff.
No, you started it. You go first.
I would just add, I was the Anthony piece at the end. I think he continues to impress in terms of his you got to have a guy that raises his level in tight games like that. And, I think that's pretty key. And to see him do that. And certainly I'm not saying he carry the group, but when you have a teammate that does that, it inspires everybody else to even to find another level, which I think is huge from that standpoint. And yeah, huge win for the Big West. The Big West is putting themselves in a pretty good seat when they do that. So kudos to Brad and his group.
I gotta comment just, from an old man perspective here, playing in Burnham Pavilion, back in the day, that was pretty cool little place. It was, intimate, and, the lighting was a little dim. It was, the fans are right on top of you. And, it was quite a place to play when you were a kid, because it was like a lot of history and a lot of, just cool things dripping around that place. But, anytime you beat Stanford at Stanford, that's always a good win. And I got to give my my hats and kudos to Brad and his crew, and taking it to his old assistant coach, Taylor Hammond. That's always fun. And, I'm sure, they were yucking it up afterwards, but it's a good win for the Big West. It definitely helps the cause for the at-large criteria when it comes down the line, and Stanford's still good. It's not like Stanford is falling off the map. It's just a good fought match by San Diego.
Well,
Talking
JR
about
remembers.
Burnham,
Go ahead.
no, I was just saying, like, in COVID happened, our last two matches of that year were in Burnham when we played them, and then the world was shut down for a second. I remember that. There was also a guy protesting on the box. Do you know how you walk out and there's that little box there, and like there was a guy up there with a briefcase protesting, and everybody's like, "There's a guy have a bomb? What's going on?" And so like, so the police had to come. It was at the end of our match, and they had to get him down. And yeah, very vivid memory of that.
Well, a little anecdote from Jay. I think one of the favorite moments in the episodes past you've shared is playing in Burnham, and they have a theme night. They have a Star Wars night. R2D2 showed up, and he's actually a keg.
Well, it wasn't in Burnham. It was in 2010 when we were in the finals against Stanford. By the way, just a little fun fact, in case anybody forgot out there, we beat Northridge in 3 straight to get to that final. And somebody on this panel might have been on that team playing. I don't know who it is.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's weird.
Don't recall that. Someone look it up. I don't recall it.
But it was in Maples Pavilion, and it was during the finals, and there was a fan group of students dressed up in Star Wars garb, and they brought in an R2D2. And as the match progressed, you could see the fans getting more unruly. And sure enough, the R2D2 was a keg dressed up. So that was pretty cool.
All right. Let's take the coach's take on it then. Brad, your thoughts on your own match?
Yeah, it was just like a knockdown drag out battle. It was a ton of fun. I know the guys loved the experience of getting to compete with a super competitive and high level team, and lots of really good volleyball. And again, Burnham is just such a good vibe. And it was so interesting, just like, and I didn't even notice it during the time, but I guess in between sets, they don't sell water. They don't it's not a money grab. Like, admissions is free. So they had like 1,000, 1,200 people there, bunch of young players, a bunch of club athletes, a bunch of families, and a bunch of students. And it's getting rowdy. Then every set ends, and it's just everyone floods out to go to the bathroom or to hit the drinking fountain. And it's just really had kind of like a high school vibe to it, where like the gym's packed, it's rowdy, it's feisty, and the teams were having a great time competing. And yeah, Stanford was really good. And I know Moses Wagner, keying in on him was really key for us, and something we wanted to focus in on because he's a heck of a player. And then Teo Snui, it felt like he hit like 1,000 against us because he's just really impressive. His block was really impressive. And I think their setter, Theorin, but he was a dog from the end line. Like, his serving was really, really impressive. And he gave us a lot of fits and a lot of problems.
Fits in the form of 3 aces, but how do you stop a Triton team that's hitting 339 on the evening, Brad? The guys are really rolling offensively.
Yeah, the offense was smooth for us all weekend. And even the match before at Menlo, we hit over 550. So Bryce and the offense were rolling. So obviously a good sign for us as we head into some Big West play this week.
Excellent start for and pick for the coach's takeover. That's Theo, not Teo. Theo Edwards' pick of the UCSD Stanford match. Let's jump over. Let's go towards Dan. Let's have him pick the next match he wants to drop on.
Well, we're on the Big West, so we'll just stay on Irvine and Hawaii. And I know,
I'm going to leave for this one.
yeah, I know Rob's kind of hurting a little bit, and so it's unfortunate. So, but we saw Hawaii really level up. Here's the thing, like, I thought it was interesting how the switch of Nolan to the outside, and you got Darcy on the opposite. But if you go look, like somebody was asking a question about how often coaches use volumetrics and stats, the L2 for Irvine in the last 4 or 5 matches hasn't passed above a 2.0. And so I think that's a pretty big piece. And you go back and look at it. And even in these 2 matches, Flexen was passing like a 1.87. And then, so I think, I wonder if Dave's trying to figure out that piece a little bit. You go back to when they beat Stanford. Who's the other L2 that was playing before?
And in Kiriakou, and then
yeah, so back in
Jimenez.
Stanford, he passed above. He was like a 2.4 or 2.5, and then he kind of dropped off. But knowing that piece a little bit, it certainly shapes a little bit of how this match goes. And from a point standpoint, night one they were back and forth, but 13 more kills for Hawaii over Irvine. And certainly Christian had 2 big nights, 17 the first night, and then 19 the second night, just in terms of how many kills he had and what he was doing. So. But the overall point differential, and then the second night, the overall point differential from it was 15 points overall, which was huge. And I really thought Hawaii got it from a block standpoint. They had 11 blocks as a collective team, and so really kind of handled the net. And you saw 2 of the pins for Irvine hit negative, in William Darcy and Flexen. So just, I don't know, it was kudos to Hawaii and stepping it up in a home crowd and, finding the second night, they did it with their block. The first night, I thought they were a little bit better offensively and kind of got some key points at key times. And the other guy is Choi. Choi with 10 and 9 digs in 2 3-game matches. So you talk about, over 3 digs a night almost, you know what I mean, just in terms of combined stats for him, and really kind of stepping it up and, kind of keeping Irvine's offense at bay a little bit. So, but yeah, Big West implications in terms of at-larges, and I think you got San Diego, Northridge here, and those will be some interesting matches of how they keep themselves in that at-large when they play a couple of these teams coming up, which will be exciting and good stuff to talk about for sure.
Let's jump up to Brad of the coaches panel talking about the UC Irvine at Hawaii series.
Yeah, I think the switch from the Irvine perspective and moving Flex into the left to get Darcy Tague on the right was obviously interesting and stood out to really everyone. And I think a couple different spins out of it. Maybe it was more to slow down the Hawaii opposite, Christian Tatritsky. Did I get that right, Rob?
Yep.
Oh, I've been hanging around you enough to.
They did not slow it down.
Yeah.
No, maybe sped him up a little bit. He some of the best he's looked all year, which was, again, impressive to see in a big match and a big performance. Or it was also, coming off of their matches with UCLA, maybe they saw they need a little bit more firepower on the pins and need to be a little bit more terminal, a little bigger at the net. So this might be a galaxy brain type move down the road to where it's just something they envision that they need to be and where they need to be playing at the end of April and beginning of May with this lineup. So they're going to not necessarily be perfect and smooth right now, but I think it'll probably end up working out pretty well. And Niff's obviously done a great job getting his guys to the tournament and getting them to play well when they get into the tournament. So from the Irvine perspective, I think it's kind of learning how to play with this new roster or this new makeup in that starting lineup. And then on the Hawaii side, I think the big thing, 2 things really stood out. I think Tread Rosenthal is really kind of coming into his own as a setter and, leading the team to hit over 350 against a really good Irvine team that serves in, and then obviously going up against Heno serve throughout that as well is impressive showing. And then the other piece, Sadritsky played great, but Sakanoko took a ton of swings and really did a great job of managing some tough situations and some tough environments and tough angles to get quality out of system high ball swings, because they were throwing a lot of balls his way. And I thought last year where he really struggled were in those situations, making some errors, and seeing that growth from him and on the left side is a big key to their success this week. So,
well, you bring up a great point. Brad, because Sakonoko, night 1, 5 kills, 5 errors, hit 0. Night 2, last night or early morning for most of us, 12 kills, 1 error, 440. So a bounce back performance.
And Hawaii on the weekend had 7 attacking errors in 6 sets of volleyball, and it's really hard to lose matches if you're hitting that effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sakanoa had 6 blocks on night 2, which was huge for him. So
Contributed
think about
defense.
what's that stat you just gave, Brad? How many attack errors on the weekend?
7 attack errors.
7 attack errors. And how many did Sakonoko have on the first night?
5.
That's gnarly.
Night 1, he had 2 night 1. The other 3 he got blocked.
Okay.
I was gonna say, holy smokes, that's
no, that was Brad doing minus, like, not counting the blocks. He's just talking about balls kind of hitting out of
only
bounds.
true attack errors.
yeah.
Well, I wanted to add also on Christian Tetrisky. If you recall, early in the season, one of the biggest blocks of the year was Keone Thim, BYU versus Hawaii. Flexen had another big block against Hawaii. The attacker was Christian Tetrisky. But yeah, the block is great. But to me, if you listen to the ball that's hit by Tetrisky on both of those highlight reels and how high it bounces, I got to ask, how hard is Tetrisky hitting that stinking ball?
I mean, hit the sweet spot, it's going to bounce down pretty fast. So I'll go next and comment on this. I think a couple things kind of stand true to me. One, to win 3-0 against a really good UC Irvine team. I know it's at home, but 3-0 both nights, I think was a little surprising to some. I agree with the panel about the move of Flexen over to outside hitter. You know, we're all still, you know, looking at some players, and some players start out hot and all of a sudden they kind of level off a little bit, and other players level off in the beginning, but kind of pick it up in recent weeks. And, you know, Niff is just trying to find some production from a position that, you know, a lot of teams struggle with. You know, everybody knows about the one outside hitter or the opposite or the one middle, and everybody's got those guys. But how do the role players step in and kind of provide support when needed? And I think he's trying to find, is this going to be an option? The question for me would be, is he going to stick with it and get creative and twist the dial a little bit and figure out some new serve, receive, formations that might alleviate some of that stress? Because it's no surprise. Everybody kind of knows that Flexen's not exactly the most polished of passers out there. He's not awful, but he's not great. And he could be a liability for some teams coming into the gym. But is Niffen going to figure something out? Is he going to stick with this? Is some other kid going to step up in the next week or two and figure out how to pass at this level consistently, provide some, you know, just be a good role player? I don't know, because I'm not in their gym. But I know Niff's a smart guy. I know he's got a lot of smart coaches around him, and he's going to figure something out, because Irvine's going to need Flexen on the court. If they're going to go move, you know, deep into the tournament and deep into the NCAAs, if they make it that far, he's going to need production from Flexen. He's got to keep him on the court somehow. And now the question is, does he put him on the outside when maybe there's a bigger opposite and maybe take his lumps a little bit passing wise? Does he move him back to the opposite where obviously he was dominating for a little bit? It'll be interesting to see what they do moving down the line.
Yeah. All right.
You guys did such a great job of kind of hitting this from every angle. I think the one unique piece that I'd add to it is the serving from Hawaii. And obviously the environment is a really, really big deal, but to have 5 guys over 40% point score, and doing it with they missed more serves than Irvine did, but the ones that are in, I mean, they're putting a ton of pressure. And to anytime you can have a lineup with 5 guys pushing over 40%, your shots of winning are looking pretty darn good. And so, yeah, I think, Hawaii, the other thing is just the ramp in which they have improved. And I think Brad touched on this, but Tread Rosenthal and his development, right? Him really starting to become the guy that people have seen for many, many years is like, hey, is this a future national team type of setter? He's got the size, he's got the ability, but does he understand how to run an offense and how to really do this at the next level? And watching him really start to improve and watching all these new pieces start to gel, Hawaii's looking pretty darn good heading into Big West. It's pretty impressive what they just did to Irvine.
Yeah, Tread Rosenthal was they didn't really talk about him a whole bunch, but you could see he's got an offensive mind where he wants to get his. It's beginning to pick up a little more, which is going to create so many problems, just like Money for Long Beach State. As he gets more offensive, you have to deal with another attacker. And Tread has been really mixing it up, and he's got super good hands and able to change it up pretty quickly.
Well, and Rob, that's a really good point. I wanted to add that was what Moni is actually doing for a lot of the players here in college is changing the bar. Like we've had a lot of big setters, you know, like I mean, Dan has had many big setters. Jay's had a couple of big setters. You know, there's a lot of size 6'8", 6'9" setters that have played in the United States for a really, really long time. Very few of them have played the way that Moni has. And you know, to have him as a competitor and have him essentially showing a lot of these setters the way that it can be done and the way you can add a lot more offense, and it's really unfortunate but really fortunate all at the same time.
Theo, what was that? What was that?
It's raining in California. That's what's happening.
Something it like a water droplet landed right on the camera.
Here's what I think is I want to piggyback on Theo's comment about taller setters. You know, the thing about taller setters is everybody goes, oh, you got a bigger block on the left side. And yeah, that's true. That's all very, very true. However, there's two components that I think people overlook. One is their ability to move, their ability to be quick and get to a bad pass, their ability to scramble in plays. You know, most taller setters are not as mobile as a smaller setter. If you were to put, you know, I don't know, a Jonathan Winder back in the day and a Donovan Constable today, Donovan's a much quicker, more agile setter in terms of defense and movement and scramble than Jonathan Winder was. Winder was good. I'm not saying he's awful, so don't send me any hate mail. But if you
I'll tell you when we play Pepperdine this weekend, okay?
Yeah, right. When you compare the two athletically in terms of quickness and ability to scramble, I think Donovan's got that beat. But here's the second one. It's the connection with the middles. People don't understand when you're a smaller setter and you get up and you're jump setting, you're still shorter than most middle blockers attack jump. And so your ability to connect, you're hitting a ball that's on its way up still, and you're able to get on a little bit quicker. It just looks different and easier. When you're a taller setter, a lot of times you're higher than your middle blockers attack. So your ability to connect with those middle blockers has got to be adjusted somewhat. And Moni's ability to find his middle blockers, either in system or out of system, is uncanny. And it makes him really special and really fun to watch. So if you're a taller setter out there, boys and girls, watch this guy, what he does, and watch how he looks and sees where his hitters are. And he adjusts his set tempos and locations based upon timing of his middles or hitters and ability to get in the air.
Yeah. Good calls. Let's see. So we went to Dan. Let's go to Brad now on the coach's takeover pick.
All right, everyone, get your deep dish pizza ready. Get your Portillo's Chicago dogs out. We're gonna talk some Loyola Lewis, the showdown for Chicago, the reignition of the rivalry between Dan and Shane, and Dan comes out on top with it.
Sounds like a boy band, Dan and Shane.
Well, that is Dan and Shay. That's the country in me. But yeah, we had ultimately, you know, Loyola, they were good. Fabakovic and Van Buren continue to be good. There was a few late errors and kind of uncharacteristic errors from Van Buren, especially in those first two sets. But overall, you know, you have Lewis, who we know, Max Rocky, OG on the right, really holding it down offensively. But to me, watching this game back, what it came down to was late game serving was really, really key. Even in the third set when Loyola won, they had some late game serving runs that really kept Lewis on their heels, and Lewis had a few service errors in that third set. But set one, set two especially, and even set four, Daniel Haber, probably the MVP of this match and the underrated player in the match, passed real well, and then from the end line, just serving absolute lasers. And in that spotted outside hitter, has not been producing a ton offensively, but ended up finishing with, I'm checking the serving numbers, but we had 4 aces on the night, 4 aces in 4 sets, and a lot of them were in big times, and that doesn't even include the overpasses he was forcing and different situations. throughout the match there. So I thought the serving from Daniel Haber. And then the other big change was in beginning of the fourth set after Lewis loses 25, 23, 26, 24 to Loyola. Dan makes the switch from Tyler Morgan, who's been setting and running a great offense, to Diego Estrada, a little bit smaller setter, a little bit younger setter. And he comes in and does a great job and really kind of feeds Max Rocky and OG throughout that. And then the big difference maker was he goes back with his float serve and serves into their rotation one. And I think he scores 4 or 5 points in their rotation one and just keeping the pressure on, keeping it consistent. And they did a great job of blocking Van Buren's tendencies in rotation one on the go. And then Fabikovic's tendencies and on the red in rotation one. And it led to a big enough separation to really catapult them to winning in 4 and cementing the Lewis flag in downtown Chicago.
There you go. Let's jump on over to Theo and thoughts on the Lewis Loyola, Dan and Shane.
Yeah,
Not Shay, almost.
This was the Chicago head-to-head battle that we had all been looking for, and I think I called it. Dan won. I mean, this is simple stuff here, guys. No, honestly, looking at the stats, looking at the numbers, this was obviously a really, really great match, and looking at how Lewis handled Van Buren, I mean, statistically, that's a guy that could easily hit 800 on any given night. And, the goal isn't to shut him down, it's to slow him down. And that's what gave Lewis an opportunity to win. And, on the Lewis side of things, OG and Max and Haber, it was like, hey, this is our 3 versus your 3, right? Fabikovich, Reed, and Van Buren, and flat out, Lewis was better. They were better from the service line. They were better offensively. I thought in general the pass numbers were similar, but Lewis was a little bit better there too. And so, you look at this, and some people would call it an upset. This is Miva volleyball right here, and that Lewis team is deadly, and especially when you give them a little bit of motivation, you get the guys from the side of Chicago where they got a little chip on their shoulder. These aren't these wealthy private school kids. They want to go in there and they want to throw down. And I love it. I love to see it. I love the battle, and tip my hat to Dan and his coaching staff. They did a fantastic job. It's a great win.
Yep. Jay.
I won't comment on the match. I think these guys are doing a fantastic job. However, I will comment on this. If you watch the Volleymetrics video and you pay attention to the handshake at the end, I could have sworn, I know how to read lips. I could have sworn when Dan shook Shane's hand, he said, "Welcome back to the Miva, mother effer." I could have sworn I heard that.
Jay's starting rumors again. That's not what happened.
The coach's takeover is getting out of control, Rob. It's getting out of control.
And that's why we have it. People love the banter on here. Let's see who's left to comment on. Oh, Jay waved his, just was trying to start the entertainment version of College Volleyball Weekly. But
we got to get Dan's side of the handshake line. We got to get to the truth.
Good game. That was about it. That was it. So
I believe that leaves us with Jay and his pick of the week.
Well, I get to comment on my own match.
Yeah. My bad. Well, I thought you were taking the fifth.
I'm still mad you were talking
rumor
about UC Irvine.
I got it.
Go for it, Dan. Sorry about that.
I thought Brad was right. I thought we did a nice job serve pass battle. I think that was pretty key. And certainly Haber was monumental in that. The only other piece was Nico had 12 digs for us and 15 touches. He did a nice job back there in that match, and was pretty good from the service line for us as well. He passed a 2.58, so against a team that can serve the ball and put some pressure on. And so it was good for our guys. It was a good response. We had lost to Loyola the last 6 matches. And so it'd been a tough heel, and Parker had been, is a phenomenal player, and it'd been tough for us to slow down. And so kudos to the guys in finding a way to string together an important win on the road. And we'll have to battle them again at our place, and they'll come in pretty pretty hot and ready to get after us. And so, but we don't have to worry about that. So I think it's our last match of the season. And my guess is it'll probably have some pretty big implications for both of us when we get to that match. But yeah. And then we had to go to Quincy. Woo! Got out of there. So that's okay.
Well, before we could talk
survived
about
that
it, I
one,
wanted
huh?
to ask you this for our fans who are unfamiliar with what you'd mentioned about Nico Paula, because he was coming off a defensive player of the week in the MIVA, or was that 2 weeks ago?
No, he's won 3 of them, but he came off one last week. Yes. Yeah.
So you'd mentioned he's passing at 2.58. Can you explain for the everyday
So that was
volleyball?
just in that match. Like, so in volumetrics, there's they have a 3 rating scale and a 4 rating scale. On the 3 rating scale, he was a 236. On the 4 rating scale, he was a 258. So they basically rate the touches on a pass between good, perfect, and honestly, volumetrics is pretty tough across the board. Like in terms of its rating scale, probably compared to anybody that's in our gym.
That's done
But
by AI, correct?
yeah, because it's done by a program and AI, and so, but honestly, it's rated consistent across the board for all the players, and so, but it is a statistic. We'll get to the end of the year where the All-American committees will be like, okay, outsides are passing where, liberos are passing where, and one we had a hard time figuring out to use before volumetrics, and once volumetrics got instituted. I knew because I was the chair of the committee. It's like, hey guys, you got to make sure you're looking at the passing numbers off these liberos and not just digs per game. And you're looking off ranked teams versus non-ranked teams and kind of where that goes, because we all know the serving pressure changes from that point. But yeah, that's where the number kind of comes up a little bit.
There you go. See, little edutainment here on College Volleyball Weekly. You're welcome. You learned something new. Let's jump over to Jay's pick on the coaches takeover.
Well, mine is regarding a little old team from the Appalachian Mountains, Lincoln Memorial University. They went up to New Jersey this weekend. 3-0 sweep against Princeton, 3-0 sweep against NJIT. Both teams which are have dabbled in the top 20 there for the last few weeks, and no doubt Lincoln Memorial is going to be able to get in and raise their status within the top 20 after this performance. I think I'm surprised by a couple of things. I don't know who's trying to get a hold of me, but somebody's trying to get a hold of me.
Jay's a secret agent. He's up there, Nova.
Apparently, I'm getting hate mail and hate phone calls now. So, the thing about Lincoln Memorial is, they're a D2 program, and they are just scrappy, and they play with a massive chip on their shoulder. If you've ever had to play in their gym, it's kind of reminiscent of the old Miracosta gym way back in the day. It's this little oval, almost looks like a hangar from an old military base. It's got wood beams everywhere. It's kind of a gnarly little place to play, but they've got a lot of players that were maybe looked at by bigger programs, but maybe not offered some of the bigger scholarship dollars. And they come into Lincoln Memorial with a little chip on their shoulder, and their coach does a real nice job of training those guys up. The other thing I think to keep in mind is it's not one person they've got. It's a handful of guys that they've got. They've got a guy named Johan Negron. They got a guy named Axel Van Bars. They got a guy named Griffin Wheatley. They got a setter named John Lewers. They just all perform evenly. There's not one guy that's the guy that everybody can't stop. It's all of them are doing their jobs adequately and enough to be able to put pressure on other teams to be successful. And I'll be honest, Princeton and NJIT, and I'll put ourselves in this category and Harvard in this category and a couple of those, we're all kind of Jekyll and Hyde. 1 week you look at me like, man, that team's really, really good. And then the next night or the next week you look at me and go, what happened? What's going on? It's not about what happened. It's about other teams stepping up their level of play. And Lincoln Memorial has been fighting for a chance for the last number of years. They're probably ranked 1 or 2, I think, in the D2 polls. Am I mistaken, Dan?
3. McHenry 1, we're 2, they're 3.
Yeah, so I mean they're right there in the hunt, and somewhere down the line they're going to be a nasty, nasty opponent to face at the highest levels if their coach John just keeps doing a great job recruiting. And so I'm extremely impressed by them. They are the hot team at the moment for me. Moving down the line for them, I think they could go undefeated. They've come off the meat of their schedule, so to speak, and the rest of
they're 13-1 right now, Jay.
Yeah, I know they're 13-1, but the rest of their schedule does not look as ominous as maybe some of the prior matches in previous weeks. I think the only one that might be hotly contested is maybe Mount Olive. That comes up in a few weeks. But North Greenville could be the team that comes out of there and shocks a lot of people in the country if they get to the big dance.
Ooh.
Yeah,
All right,
Lincoln Memorial for me, this has been a fun team to watch and see develop. And Jay alluded to it. John Cash was the longtime head coach there. He's now with the women's program, and Brian has taken over. Brian Hoag's taken over, and he's done a great job just kind of continuing to elevate the program. And really where it's shown is just their level of preparation and their level of intensity. And they came out and played us, and it's their only loss on the season. But this team was so dialed in. An hour and a half before the match, they're all in unison doing the same exact warm-up. They're all dialed in. They're going through that. And really, I think that level of attention to detail paired with guys who have that chip on their shoulder, guys who are really talented players. And then two of my favorite players are their two middles. Matt Gentry, who's been an absolute monster for his last 3 years at least there. And then Torres is the other middle, who I believe he's from Puerto Rico, if I'm not mistaken. But both of them have done amazing jobs because they can set him in system, they can set him in medium system, and they both have a ton of range going up against a lot of different blocks. And when we played them, it was all about slowing down the middles up against them. And, you continue to see it. Like Gentry hit 579 on the week against Princeton and NJIT, two tough matches. And I know for a fact they're going in there trying to slow him down and trying to stop him. And to hit 500 against a group of teams trying to stop you is really darn impressive. And I agree with Jay. I think I feel pretty confident saying they're going to be a 20 win team with 1 or 2 losses, especially you throw in the IVA tournament in there as well. And I definitely have that match against Mount Olive earmarked. That's going to be a heck of a one to watch and see them duke it out.
Ooh, one of the questions on the board that came up is about at-larges, and if Lincoln Memorial finishes a season without only 1 loss, you have to take a look at that, don't you think?
No,
they don't have enough criteria.
Well,
No? All right.
here's why. The schedule. Like, I mean, they're phenomenal. Like, I don't want to take anything away from that, but like, they're a phenomenal team. I mean, yeah, you got to take a glance at it, but I think the part that's tough is like they haven't played enough top 20 teams in that schedule. Do you know what I mean? Now, where does NJIT end up? Where does Princeton end up? Or, does anybody else in their schedule get ranked? That could help them a little bit, but I think that becomes the tough piece. It's like, I think they were trying to join the MIVA. I don't know what happened. It really would have helped them out, like schedule wise, if they could have got into the MIVA, just in terms of that conversation we're having right now. And then where does that take them and where do they go? And because I like you guys, I think they're a phenomenal group. Gentry's on year 7 or 8, I think. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I love Gentry. I've coached Gentry on the beach, and he's a phenomenal player. And he hopefully will make All-American. He should be an All-American somewhere. So if one of you guys are on that, I'm poaching or telling you to make sure he's in that list of guys. But he's a phenomenal middle and does it really. The other guy, Lures, and somebody brought him up a little bit. So his uncle's a beach player, and Lures is a beach player, and he's a phenomenal volleyball player, just across the board. And so I think it'd be great to see how they kind of finish out and go. But great group, great team. We talk about the chip. They've had the chip for a while. And I think they win that IVA tournament again. I think haven't they won it every year?
Have they?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
so I think they're posed to win it again. I don't know who's going to challenge them that's at that level. So it's more, can they stay consistent where they need to from that standpoint?
Yep. Anyone else have anything to add on the Lincoln Memorial match?
Yeah, I just think that it would be cool, like kind of like Dan said, it would be nice to see them play some of the lowest ranked teams in the country and play against an Irvine, a Hawaii, really see where they're at, right? They obviously played San Diego and that's their 1 loss on the year. But it would just be nice to see what it would look like if we got to see them in a conference playing top ranked teams on a regular basis and how that pans out. And like Dan said, Gentry's the real deal, man. In the 1 match that they lost against San Diego, He's hitting 533 on the year, and against San Diego, he hit 625. I mean, like no
we were
one's
trying to
been
put a
able to stop
triple
this
block
guy.
in front of him as much as possible. And
Yeah, I mean, so
we're at full bunch.
everyone knows he's good. Everyone's trying to stop him. He's still hitting over 500 on the year, so it's pretty impressive for sure. They're doing a great job.
Reminds me of those Evan Corey days back at Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah.
Getting
Yep.
those highlight reels, like who's this Lincoln Memorial? Who's Evan
Talking
Corey?
about talking about recruits, you wish you would have got. We had Evan Corey on a visit. Darn, I should have took him. Boy, I messed up. Look at that. I told you that before.
You're jumping to our questions too quickly.
But here's the thing I worry about Gentry on the All-American committee, Theo. Like, they look at stats against ranked teams, and they look at stats overall. So when you go to look at his ranked team stats, who's he got? He's going to have San Diego, and right now he's going to have NJIT and Princeton. Those will be his three, right?
Yep.
So he won't have the volume of numbers, and hopefully they can I mean, I got to imagine he'll get some other accolades for the non-conference stuff, but you hope that they pay attention. Whoever's on that committee is paying attention, going, hey, maybe he doesn't have quite as many matches, but this is a guy that deserves that. And so,
he's definitely in that conversation. It's a bummer that the schedule just doesn't align for him.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to end our segment with a quick flash of the matches or the teams for me, because this is the coach's takeover. So you don't want to hear from me. Pepperdine taking Grand Canyon twice. That was 12-9. Pepperdine defeating Grand Canyon twice. In Malibu. Get to see him in Irvine this week. And interesting to see. It's a homecoming of sorts for head coach John Winder, who went to high school at Woodbridge High School in Irvine. So also lost the national championship match at UC Irvine in 2008 against a Penn State with a person by the name of Matt Anderson on that roster. So take you back there. But it's now time, and you guys didn't steal any players this week before we got to the segment. Who are your players of the week? Who looks like they're not ready? Oh, Jay.
I'm going to go because I'm going to mention the kid again. John Lewis, the setter for Lincoln Memorial, gets my nod for the week. Running really good offense, heck of a little competitor. And no doubt would make the roster at a lot of larger programs if he had that shot. So John Lewis getting my nod for the week.
All right, go over to Dan.
Cole Hartkey, I pretty believe that I was trying to look it up the other. He had 18 kills both nights. I think he's inserted back. He was hurt, right? Or he was out a little bit. So to see him back in the lineup and have two big matches for them against Grand Canyon. But back in there, and big dude and hits high for sure.
Yeah, good call. Brad, your player.
I got Sam Hoskins from McKendree. They continue to just keep taking care of business in the MIVA. We didn't talk about them much, but they're playing really high level volleyball, and Sam's a big piece of that. He had 18 kills. And then I forget what the other.
And then 22.
22 there the following night. So continues to impress.
All right, Theo.
Yeah, I'm putting Anthony Sherfan in there. Big upset win, 17 kills, hit over 300. I mean, he's doing some really, really nice things, and it looks to me like he's starting to really come into his own in terms of the offense and moments to set him and things of that nature. And then I got to add Tread Rosenthal in there too. I mean, that was probably one of the more impressive sweeps of the year so far, and Tread's a real big component of that.
Yeah, I'm going to add mine in there just because I as much as I want to say Christian Tetrisky, who played phenomenally all weekend and just proved that he's a bomber, I got to go for the little guy, Aleu Choi. The junk he was getting off of blocks, the balls he was diving, going horizontal for, the passing off the tough serves from Irvine. He's a dime king, as far as I know. So Aleu Choi is my guy. Christian Tetrisky, you're a really close second, just so you know. But you already have Tread Rosenthal. The three guys doesn't look good on the graphic. So with that, quick one match to watch, and we're going to go to the fan questions. So what you watching, Theo, since you went last on that one?
Yeah, so I think there's some really great matches this week. I'm going to throw out San Diego and Santa Barbara because I think that's a really epic duo, and obviously as far as the Big West is concerned, with only 10 conference matches, every match is so valuable. So I think I'll be watching that one for sure. And then USC and BYU.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, two teams obviously have been playing pretty darn well of late, and I think it'd be interesting to see how they match up.
Yep. Okay. Let's go, Brad.
Ooh, I got I'll go out east. I got Harvard Charleston. Just the EIVA is just unknown at this point, and I think that if someone can sweep that series, that puts them in a really good spot here, rolling to the midway point of conference play for them.
Just one. So let's go back over to Jay.
Well, that Harvard Charleston one will be interesting because Charleston's starting setter is out right now. Hopefully he comes back in for that weekend because that is a good one. I've got two. Sponsored by my favorite Mexican restaurant, Filiberto's, Penn State at Grand Canyon. I want to see what happens there. Sponsored by the 405 freeway, everybody. Long Beach State versus Northridge. Let's get out the popcorn.
There we go. You got to love the pump up by Jay. He's a hype man.
And let's not forget the Santa Barbara, San Diego one. It's basically UC Campus Point versus UC Blacks Beach. Which one's got the better surf spot? That's what I want.
Just make sure Theo isn't coaching from the sandbar. We'll be all right.
Right.
Let's go to Dan.
Well, since Jay took 3 matches, I was going to bring up San Diego and UC Santa Barbara, but since he already brought it up, Stanford, UCLA. How does Stanford bounce back? And they're playing UCLA. So I think that becomes key. And then how about Menlo versus Vanguard?
The D2 battle.
D2 battle in the MPSF. Where does that go? 2 solid programs doing some good things. So I think that'll be a good matchup and to kind of see where some of that's at a little bit.
Fighting Todd Hollenbecks.
So.
Dan,
all right.
Dan, are you at home this week?
No, we go to Atlanta. A little bit different trip and playing Emmanuel, Fort Valley State, and Morehouse. Morehouse is so Julian Moses, who used to play for his dad, Edwin Moses, went to Morehouse and was a big component for starting volleyball in the SIAC.
I think it'd be really cool for you to give, at least for the coaches that are listening, like the details of that trip and how easy is it to hit those 3 schools.
I will let you know after I go next week in terms of that. So, but yeah, I think me and Larry, who's the coach at Fort Valley State, and those of you who don't know, Larry's a Chicago product, played at Ball State. So I've known Larry a long time. So we had made plans to kind of go out there and support them, and they've got a strong program, and so it's a good opportunity for us to come down and play in front of their fans down there. And I think it's important that programs go to other places that don't necessarily. Hawaii's done this fairly well, and you've seen UCLA do this, and the ability to travel into some geographic areas that don't see some of that volleyball at that high level. So I think that's part of the process.
Yep. Charlie and his crew done a good job going to the East Coast of Carolinas and traveling up and down, playing some matches and getting some really good crowds in those gyms. So,
hey, did anybody mention Loyola and Ball State?
No one did.
Woo! That's a big one. You talk about McKendree kind of in the lead. We're hanging out, but the Ball State Loyola, that's a big match. Like, how does that fare? And I'm not sure. I think it's at Loyola. I gotta go look. So
I'm looking it up. It is at Ball State.
At Ball State. So yeah, big match for the MIVA.
Yeah, that was that log jam is already happening in the MIVA with McKendree sitting atop of it.
It's gonna be a log jam, I think.
Well, let's jump over to the fan questions, and we have some people that want to ask our current exhibits in Jurassic Park to answer this question. Our older senior statesman on the panel.
There's a new Jurassic Park movie coming out, by the way, Jay. It's like Jurassic Park 15. Like, save the dinos. I don't know.
It's Jay and Dan about recruiting. I think they started on it, but I'll go ahead and read the question out for you. Let's see. Have you had a player that you turned down, and when you saw them on in a season or 2 later at a different school, thought, "Dang, I missed that one"?
Yes.
100%.
More than I would care to admit.
I think if you're a coach, you can never say I nailed it on every kid. And it happens for various reasons. You might see a kid for the first time live. He might not be feeling 100%. He might have an off day and you're like, it's not really. And then you're really fixated on somebody else who maybe has a great day. There's that. there's, you know, men's volleyball, some of the guys are late bloomers in terms of their quality. So sometimes when you see them young, they fall off the radar. And you know, for whatever reason, they just get better and better. And then all of a sudden their senior year, you're like, wow, I never even saw that kid. What happened? And then everybody says, no, you had him on your list, but you crossed him off. But here's the thing that I think is the most important. It's not about that kid saying, screw you, I hate you, you passed on me. They use it for motivation. And I'm going to give an example I think that Dan can appreciate here, because it happened with the junior national team that I coached on years ago. A gentleman by the name of Greg Petty was on the roster for the training. And unfortunately, we passed on him because we just didn't feel that he was going to give us what we needed to be able to be successful. He parlayed that, and he's still playing professional these days. And he used it as motivation to get better at his craft. And, you know, you see a lot of kids that, you know, that you looked at and you go, man, that kid's not for me. And then you see him a year or two in and you go, man, what did I miss? How did I miss that? And they use it as motivation. So I give kudos to the kids, because that's a tough pill to swallow when you get turned down or you get maybe turned away when you don't really know, but then you use it for motivation to get better. So I give those kids a lot of credit.
Yeah. The other part I would add, it's a lot of times it's like, maybe that guy doesn't fit what I need yet. You know, I'll give an example. Is it Kibbe? Who's the guy at Ball State that just graduated? Outside, hoping to get to a Final Four. Why does his name pop? Caleb Jennis. So Caleb Jennis was a setter/hitter for his club team. And we were kind of looking at him as a setter, but we ended up signing another guy, and you know, weren't all in yet as him a hitter. He goes to Ball State and he's an All-American as a hitter. So that's an example of a guy where like somebody else saw something at the time, and we were trying to figure out some other pieces. And yeah, that happens. And that happened with Evan Corey. We were trying to figure out where Evan Corey was at. Like I could list off some guys, you know, and we pride ourselves as a program finding guys that are under the radar. You know, Tyler Mitchum couldn't chew and walk when he walked into our program. And that guy ended up touching 12-3 and was phenomenal. And so we pride ourselves on finding some of those guys. But so you see those guys. McKendry does a fantastic job of this. You talk about Kevin Shuley, you know, is a little bit under the radar and goes there and just is a phenomenal player. Hoskins, we're just talking about. Like, they do a great job of taking some of those guys. And so, yeah, I think the late blooming thing is big in men's volleyball. And you got to keep, that's why that thing, like where you get juniors committed, it's like you're always saving a spot for two. And I feel for the D1s now with a roster limit of 18. So their ability to maybe pick up the guy or two that might turn or blossom into it gets really difficult now with that roster of 18. And so it'll be interesting to see how that shapes, because I think that's opened the doors and opportunities for a lot of kids. It's also why you see the D2s, Lincoln Memorial, us, McKendry, Vanguard, Menlo, Concord, like these programs are able to sustain that competitive piece because of those pieces. At some point, there's not enough programs to sustain opportunities for all these kids that are late bloomers, are going to develop into players and be things, you know, players that you watch and stay competitive in terms of that. So,
and I think the other piece to that is that goes overlooked so often through the recruiting process is it's not just like this kid would have figured it out regardless of where they're at. I think most of the time, 90% of the time, if not more, 98% of the time, the players end up where they're supposed to be. And especially the players who end up having a lot of success and end up really developing, like Caleb Jennis in that situation. Like if he goes to Lewis, his journey, or if he goes anywhere, his path is totally different and totally changes. And the development that's going on, the positions he's playing in practice, the things going on outside of volleyball, it is not just like an absolute guarantee this player is going to develop if you transplant them to another university. I think so often they're ending up, the players you see have success are ending up in the right spot at the right time for them to really grow and flourish as a player and as a young man.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm going to add just an assistant coach perspective and a quick little story. We had a guy in our office, and back when I was an assistant and was doing the lead of the recruiting, I brought in this guy. You guys might know his name. His name is Ethan Champlin. And he sits in our office. And for those that don't remember his story, he took a gap year. So this is him in our office, his actual senior year of high school. He's not being recruited. No one's that interested in him. He's a great ball control player, but he's really small. He's not really a true outside quite yet physically. And to give you an understanding of the challenges that some of the assistant coaches face in terms of loving guys, wanting to make decisions, and head coaches having a different view, right? And a different vision for what they see for the program. And I was really, really excited about Ethan and felt like we should have made an offer. And he was excited to come to Northridge. And we didn't give him an offer. We kind of said, hey, you could walk on type of situation. And still to this day, I think about, to Brad's point, that kid was built to be at UCLA, right? Like that was where he was supposed to go and where his path obviously ended. And but you definitely, every time you played him, every time you see him play, you're like, dang it, we could have made an adjustment on that one, huh?
As he flings his 2 natty rings in front of you.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, let's jump to our next question. I don't know if these guys can stay a little bit longer today because that was only the first question of our fan questions. But I'm going to have the 2 younger guys, although I've seen you guys forever in the game as assistants or on other staff. So Theo and Brad, you're going to start on this one. Pros and cons of using 2 Liberos. Are Liberos really so differently skilled to warrant using 2? Go for it. Who wants to start?
I'll go. So I think there's 2 layers to it, right? Obviously the team and the group plays a big perspective. And usually I'd say most teams have 2 liberos on their roster. They're very clearly the 2 best passers. And then one might be a little bit better on defense. One might be a little bit better in serve receive. In my opinion, I think very rarely do we see a drastic difference between the skill set of serve receive and defense. I think for the most part, they're usually pretty balanced. There's definitely some situations where it makes sense. But I think in my eyes, as a former libero, being the libero and being on the court predominantly most of the time leads to better consistency on the defense, better consistency in serve receive, and better consistency with the other 5 guys on the court around them. I think one other caveat and one other layer that's really important that even like some of the guys on our team don't even necessarily know before we kind of walk them through some of our thoughts is if you dress up 2 liberos, those are your 2 liberos for the entire match. You cannot switch it out at all. You either have one of those 2 liberos on the court. If you put 1 libero in the match, you could then switch your liberos in between sets. So for a team, if maybe they only have 1 libero who's healthy or able to play, they're only going to dress down 1 libero because then they could take their 3rd outside and make them a libero if anything were to happen to their starting libero. So within the rules, there's a slight advantage to having that 1 libero because you can still make shifts and switches to the lineup. But then other than that, it's I think coaches prerogative and kind of what your roster has unfold in front of you.
Cool.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the 2 libero system is that you end up in a position similar to what your other players have, where during the set you can sub. And so a lot of people think of it from the serve receive versus defensive, right? And the ability for them to go in and out, which in talking to most liberos, most coaches, most people are in the kind of the mindset that that's difficult to do. Mentally, it's tough to come in and out almost every single side out, every single play. It's tough to find your rhythm and really feel connected to the game. But we've seen it done, and we've seen a lot of teams do it successfully. But I think the biggest advantage and what's been really nice to see is if you have that 2 libero system in place. Back in the day, when you had the 1 libero, if he had trouble passing or something wasn't going well, there was no change you could make. I mean, you could put the middle back in, but otherwise you were kind of stuck, and they were in a position until the end of that set. There was nothing you could do in the moment to try and get that particular set win. And so I feel like the 2 libero system has kind of just opened it up for a little bit more sub action and just a little bit more ability to make changes.
All right, Jay and Dan, want to jump in on that one?
They nailed it.
They did good. I think I've had maybe once or twice where I've done the in and out thing. I think it's like Theo said. I think there's a rhythm piece that's pretty tough on the guy, but in those unique situations, there was this distinct difference for why we were doing it from that standpoint. But and then I've had years where it's tough to label two liberos because you're like, I could use that guy as a sub for passing on an outside. Do I want to waste him where I'm not using him right there? And then there's years like this year where we label two liberos every game. Maybe your libero needs a mental break and you take a swap for a little bit or something like that. So just lots of different scenarios that can come up for different teams as they're training and trying to figure things out.
Yep. All right, we'll jump to our next question. I'm going to reword it a little bit for what I've read on Volley Talks, where I got this one from. But they were asking about the state of USAV sponsored boys volleyball. I imagine they're referring to the tournaments. I guess barely 100 teams registered for the nationals compared to 1,300 plus for AAUs. Do you guys see John Spraw making any difference here in the short, medium, and long term? If they see any negative impact on men's college volleyball because of this deficiency on the USAV side. So don't know who wants to jump in first, but have at it.
Well, the
Yeah,
fact
I'll jump.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll jump in quickly. Do I think Spraw and them are making a play to get boys volleyball back under the umbrella? Yes. It's a not very well talked about because it's all kind of behind closed doors. But they are making an active push to get boys back to the USA Nationals as opposed to AAUs. But on the terms of, helping out boys volleyball in general for colleges, that remains to be seen. I know Spraw really wants men's volleyball to continue to be on the forefront. Whether or not he gets that done in the next year, 2, 3, 4, or whatever that case is, he's drinking from the fire hose right now. But I know that he cares a lot about it, and we're all hoping that happens. So keep that there.
Yeah.
It's tough that USA dates are the same time as AAU dates. I mean, what are you going to do? If they want to change it, they can't have them at the same time. I think AAU is not going anywhere. So I think there's got to be a piece where it's like, how do you offer both of them, and what's the right time frame to offer both of them, and what does that look like? Do they do it in the summer? Do they do it in February? I'll throw that out there for USA. Does USA have their nationals in February and then you leave AAUs for the June, July, and then USA has their programming for all their stuff during the summer? Just another way to look at it a little bit. But do I have faith that Sprawl is going to make a move and change? 100%. I just don't think in the short term it was going to happen this summer. I think it was going to take some time about what does it look like and how do they reframe it? How do they build it back up through the regions? Because they got more going on than just that. I think they were trying to figure out some region stuff and how does that play into the boys, and how do you get kind of a coexisting relationship with AAUs, not, hey, we're going to do USA instead of AAUs, because that's not going to functionally happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You look at the history, helps you understand kind of what's going to happen moving forward. And at least in Southern California, there's in talking to the club directors and kind of what had happened with USAV and why the switch went to SoCal Cup and why they were essentially tired of what USAV was doing. And so much of it was USAV really wasn't looking to cater to the clubs. They weren't looking to make adjustments based on quality of play, level of play, what the clubs really wanted. And I really think that was one of the mistakes that they were making was they spent very little time understanding the needs of a lot of the very important clubs. And it's crazy to say it that way because I think in you go back when I was playing club, when it was a time when we were using high school gyms, right? You didn't even have central locations. You treated all the clubs the same, right? Whether you came from Chicago, whether you came from New York, you treated them all very similar. And USAV tried their best to just make everything even and balanced. And one of the mistakes of that was you had a lot of these Southern California clubs that became powerhouses. I mean, they were absolutely top tier in terms of level, in terms of sending kids to the next level. And you see it in Chicago too, right? There's definitely a hierarchy in terms of clubs. And not catering to those clubs and understanding their needs and building tournaments and formats that really helped the clubs, helped them with a timing perspective, helped them with location, things of that nature. AAU walked in and said, hey, we'll do it. What do you guys need? And SoCal Cup, similar, right? Like they walked in and said, hey, we understand what you guys want. We'll actually go ahead and take this buck and we'll make sure we do it exactly how you want it. And And like everything else, wherever the talented teams went, the teams that were looking to get great competition, they followed, so that they could play against the best players in the country and get a great experience. And so, to me, what USAV has to do, and what John, I'm sure, is focused on, because he understands this really well, is how do you put the clubs back in control, in the sense that give them the things they need and make it so that, I agree with Dan, AAU is not going anywhere. So how do you work in harmony and find a way to add value to what the clubs are already doing? And it's going to be a challenging road, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I think for sure Spraw's got to be working on it, and it's obviously a huge money base that USAB can draw from with that situation. So resolving that's got to be pretty high on the priority list. And then in terms of how it affects college coaches and how it affects the future of these players, is as coaches, we're going to go where the best competition and the best players are, whether it's AAU, USAB, or anywhere in between. We want to find the best players. So that's going to be true with every single program, regardless of anything. So it's pretty simple on that end.
Well, that's a great segue for the other question that came up. And they were asking to hear you guys talk about the growth of the boys game, particularly on the high school level. Has it changed the way that you guys recruited, and are players more prepared or better prepared now than in the past?
The thing that's, well, yeah, there's a couple pieces. The thing that's changed recruiting is how much international recruiting we're doing compared to what we were doing 10 years ago. And that's everybody on the screen right now. And I hate to say that because I think there's been phenomenal American growth, more high schools, more clubs, more kids playing, AAU's bigger. But when I go recruiting now, it's like, not only am I trying to filter through all the great American kids and who's going to be the late bloomers. And, I'm not, and this is probably true for the whole screen, is I'm probably not getting the top 5%. I might be able to throw my name in the hat. Maybe there's a situation that lines up for a guy that we might be able to get, but we're not getting that top 5%. We're not getting the guy that's getting the NIL deal from Long Beach or UCLA or Hawaii or some of that stuff coming up. But even those programs, if you look at Hawaii and some of those, their NIL deals, they're trying to figure out money for their international guys. And they're opting in, and how does that change that landscape? And so, yeah, there's tons of growth, which is awesome. There's tons of D3 and D2s popping up. There's not enough coaches to coach the programs that are popping up because they don't get paid enough to go do that compared to what they can go make doing something else. So there's this coaching issue on top of that. And so, but there's a lot of layers to that question and a lot of different directions we can go. But yeah.
Well, what's the coach's name? The basketball coach at St. John's?
Patino.
So there's a video I just saw.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, you want to talk about how gnarly it is. The host asked, hey, where are you looking at in the high schools and the junior clubs and this? And he goes, yeah, we're not even recruiting in high school anymore. We're just looking at transfers. So he goes, we need to win, and we need to win now. I don't have time to develop. I need a kid that's battle tested, and I'm just going to take transfers. That's a gnarly thing to think about.
But I thought the other great thing of him, if you listen to some of the interview, it's like you get all these coaches that are getting out of the business and like, hey, I don't want to deal with NIL. I don't want to deal with the transfer portal. I don't want to deal with this. But he's like, no, you just have to change how you look at it, how you view it, if you want to stay in it, you have to evolve with the recruiting side. And that's any of us. You have to evolve with how I'm recruiting compared to 10 years ago, compared to 5 years ago. And hey, I got to dive into a little international. I got to dive into the transfer portal. Where are those pieces and how am I looking for kids? And I think that's a piece as a coach. If you want to keep staying in the game, you can't bitch and whine and complain about, oh, it's changed or the kids are changed. Like you got to kind of move forward and be like, hey, how do I have to reach these kids now compared to how I reached them before? How do I have to recruit a little bit different to stay competitive? So I thought when he said that, it was really good.
And on Dan's point, I think coaches have always had the transfer portal, right? They get a new job offer, they're out. Now the players have it, and I think for some of the coaches, they don't like that as much. When the reality is, why shouldn't they have the same options that we have? As we've seen 2 head coaches leave and assistant coach leave as well. Like everyone's got to do what's best for them in the long run and their families. And then the second piece is the growth in boys volleyball. Like where I've seen it in the positive sense has been the fandom, the support, the kids coming out to watch the matches. Is there's a lot of players who aren't necessarily going to be playing Division I volleyball, but they love the sport. They're into the sport. They're watching the reels on Instagram, the TikToks, the highlight reels, and the different YouTube videos, and they're into it. I think that's so amazing. I think that's a big piece that I know I miss coaching wise, is like, I don't see the impact that some of these highlight reels or some of these kids are seeing, and some of these different avenues that youth volleyball players are being exposed to, because just like players can help raise the bar for us in the NCAA, we're raising the bar for youth volleyball players and club volleyball players and high school volleyball players. And I think it's really growing in a positive impact, and the level of play in high school tournaments and club tournaments is going up tremendously.
Good point, Brad.
If you're a college program and you don't have somebody doing videography and then clipping it onto your social media, you are missing the boat right now. Like I'm
I
telling
have
any
3
coach
clips
right,
this year. 3 clips,
Yeah.
6 million views.
yeah,
3,
like,
and that's just me sitting on the sidelines. I'm sitting courtside.
yeah, any coach of any program, like you need to have somebody videographer, somebody doing clips with a phone, somebody doing the stuff. Like have a player that's on the bench. Coach, be okay with him having his phone if he's going to be clipping some videos while the stuff's going on. Like that stuff's huge from a recruiting standpoint. Like Brad talked about, these kids are looking at that stuff and seeing it picked up. I think it's really important and really big.
2 people, okay? If you haven't seen any of this on Instagram, look up Nakoba Visuals. He is an absolute wizard with Instagram highlight reels, and an amazing dude and a cool person. And then second thing, if you don't know what we're talking about, go to YouTube, type in Moo Moo Cow Johnny, a legend. And literally, I've gotten to know him really well. And he meets players and they're awestruck like he's a celebrity. He has 100+ subscribers on YouTube and just posts pure volleyball, nothing into it. It's absolutely amazing. And seeing our guys, young guys, and how they react to him is just so cool and so fascinating. It just really just shows how big of an impact the growth in youth volleyball is having right now.
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit on the question, and specifically the growth of high school volleyball, and really the states that have been adding high school volleyball. And I think the question that they asked was, how has that impacted us? And if you look at the history of sports, and specifically youth sports in the United States, you look at basketball, you look at soccer, all of us are seeing the impact of high school adding boys volleyball in terms of more clubs, more competition, more players, right? Like Dan touched on briefly, though, the infrastructure, the coaches to manage it, the support and the resources to back it, so that it goes from being intermediate level and beginner level to actually getting to a space where you're going to see it at the Division I, Division II, and players that are capable of playing at that level. That part takes a long time, and it has with every sport that's ever gone through it. And so the addition of high school volleyball in a lot of places that haven't had it is fantastic, and it's a really, really big deal. I don't want to downplay that, but I do think that you got to realize that the length of time it takes to genuinely grow it out, so that you start seeing Division I's being impacted with those players, it takes some time. And yes, I love where we're at. The growth has been tremendous. The top 5%, the top 10% of competition has not necessarily changed from those recent ads in boys volleyball around the country.
Yep. Got to go. One last question. That's a quickie. Name it if you remember the athlete and the place you saw this. The question was, what has been the farthest missed serve that you've seen in a match? And I think this user was referring to one from last night's match between Irvine and Hawaii. But let's go Theo, Brad, Jay, then Dan, and I'll close it out.
Yeah, the one that we had was actually a Northridge guy, and it was I was actually a player at the time. We were in the men's gym at UCLA. This guy named Dan Rhodes, who actually is a multiple-time All-American and one hell of a volleyball player, hit a ball with backspin. And if you've ever been in the men's gym at UCLA, it hit the top corner of the highest part of the ceiling on the back wall. And the rumor is that if it didn't hit that wall, it would still be circling the planet today in orbit.
All right. We go to Brad.
I don't have specific ones, but I got two guys that I remember were really good at, were really impressive at serving and had special arms. And with great power comes some great mishits, as was the quote from Spider-Man. Was Tim Moses, who I actually played with at Concordia. He was a heck of an opposite with a great arm, and a couple times dented some walls in some gyms we went to. And the second one was Troy McGorian. His brothers actually played at Northridge, and he played at Pepperdine. And man, that guy had a special arm. And sometimes it doesn't all align, and sometimes it takes off on you guys.
Yep. Jake.
I don't have anyone in particular. I just love the heckling that comes with those kinds of things, because volleyball players are uniquely special at heckling. And I only wish I could have been there to hear the responses for any of the ones that we're talking about.
All right. And Dan.
Well, I got two other scenarios. When you serve under the net, which when it happens, there's a special things that happens in our gym, which I won't get into, but yeah, you serve under the net. And then the other one is when the ref gets hit by your guy that is serving the ball, which I feel for the refs, because I've seen some refs just get lit up, you know what I mean, with a 70-mile-an-hour ball. And but no, if I got a guy that spatches one, it's always a good humor more than anything. We never get upset at that guy because that guy's trying to make something happen. And so
awesome. I'm going to drop one because it was UC Santa Barbara at Smith Fieldhouse against BYU. I don't know if it was intentional or not.
Had to do with the elevation, you know, just
exactly. Well, let's just say they were serving from one end. It totally skipped the entire crowd that was on the floor and went up into the railing sitting high above that. And I'm like, that looked a little intentional to me, but I'm not going to say who, just in case it wasn't. But I was like, wow, that was a very badly misserved. So we'll end on that. We had one more question, but we can hit that up another time. So we'll talk about it, I'm sure, as we come in the upcoming weeks. That's Theo Edwards of CSUN, Brad Rostratter of UC San Diego, Jay Hosick of George Mason, and Dan Friend of Lewis. Appreciate all your time this week in answering our fan questions in the Coaches Takeover. And best of luck this week, because you guys are killing it. And thank you to our viewers and listeners. Appreciate the comments again. When we miss stuff, it's not intentional. It's because we run out of time, which is what we always do. But that's a good problem to have. So, gentlemen, good luck this week.
Thanks for listening to College Volleyball Weekly. Be sure to follow Rob Libero at The Rob on the Mic on Instagram and at Rob on the Mic on Twitter.